by the hat. I was like, you know what?
Okay, we'll call it May 2nd, Penn Traffic Information Meeting orders. With the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Special reports.
We need a roll call.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. I apologize. Thank you.
Mrs. Ising.
Here.
Mr. Kachasik.
Here.
Dr. Koshko.
Here.
Mr. Leonard.
Here.
Mr. Matarazzo is absent this evening. Mr. Nemec.
Here.
Mr. Petrucci.
Here.
Mr. Stovall.
Here.
Dr. Trey.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Lega. Okay, special reports. Myself, career tech. I was unable to attend the meeting last month because of family issues. The graduation is next Monday night, and our next meeting is the just trying to second, third, fourth, 18th of this month. Is your next meeting, career tech, and also the budget will be passed. We need six out of 9 to pass the budget for career tech, and I hope all we get a unanimous. No, it won't be unanimous majority to approve that. Okay, executive session, we also discussed real estate personnel. No, he hasn't. Exec said we discussed real estate, we discussed personnel and other matters dealing with the employees. Okay, information, Dr. Harris.
Sure. First off, we have Trent Jones, our student union representative.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Like I said last week, we don't have much to report. School is finally winding down. I'm smiling as I say that. You know, I'm ready for summer. Glad we have this hot weather. Elections are tomorrow, and we'll let you know who wins the following week. And prom is coming up pretty soon. We had a mock accident. It was absolutely amazing. I think that a lot of people benefited from it. You can see the cars out in the front. Quite a few rescue people. Rescue squads. Is that correct? Correct. I don't know. The rescue people came out and showed us how they would rescue people from a car. There was a party and stuff like that. That students went into cars, then they wrecked the cars, and eventually they were rescued or killed. And it was meant to show that you shouldn't drive at prom. So it was pretty cool. And if you guys had stuff to do with that, we really thank you. It was very impactful. That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Trent. Next, we have Mr. Inglace for the instruction update.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thanks for helping me out here today. We have the project's going pretty well. We got a lot of work going on in the pool area. We have extensive work in the kitchen area, and we're very optimistic and that everything's going to be done by the time kids come back to school. So we've been keeping tabs with the contractors relative to that date of August 18th when they need to be done. They've assured me that they're on target and it should be done in time, with the exception of some, minor issues and punch list types of things. They will still be around in September, I'm sure, to address some things like that. But the project is on track to be done as scheduled. We have $16,758 worth of change orders approved this month, so it's not as bad as it could be. We have some credits, and we also have some additions here for your approval. I'm going to let Hank talk to them because he has a better construction mind than I do, especially when you start getting into some of these things that are heating and plumbing related. You can talk better than I can, Hank. So
the majority of that number falls under one change order. And that's the one that I think we've talked about once or twice, and that was an existing condition that the contractors found when they shut the power down in the building to do the work for one of the panels that feeds some of the building. And it was found that when they shut the power down, that a panel that was supposed to be of a certain size with 3 sets of feeders in it actually only had 2 sets of feeders hooked up, and the 3rd set of feeders was bad and never connected. And so They did some research for that to figure out the best. We looked at multiple ways to try and solve that because the new design requires the additional power that was needed for 3 feeders. So we did some research into that and looked at some options, and we were lucky enough that there was an extra conduit installed back when the building was built originally, and that conduit was found to be viable, so they could pull wires through that conduit to feed this feeder. It's a long run, and that's where the majority of that money came in. If that hadn't been the case, they would have had to run all 3 sets through the building again, and that's the number that we brought originally being a really large number, but luckily that didn't have to happen. So that's about $18,000 of the $16,700 worth of change orders. So the rest of the change orders combined ended up being a small credit, and they were just minor things like some issues with some window trim and eliminating some walls here and adding some other walls there. Things that happened during construction, and after looking at things, it was decided that it might be better to have a wall here instead of there, type of stuff. But the other stuff was all minor.
Thank you, Andrew. Just to note, our remaining contingency is approximately $283,000. And that gives, we still have 3 months of the project left. So hopefully that lasts us. It should. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Scott, can I ask what percentage have we done with the project with the 3 months left?
Oh, it's about 80%?
I would say at least, yes. All the things that are left are areas like the kitchen and the pool and the locker rooms and the site, but they're all areas that we've already gone into, and hopefully we've found anything that might come up in those areas. So we should be winding down on a lot of this stuff. So we should, I think we'll be in good shape.
I would agree. We do. There will be. We are aware of some issues in those locker rooms we're addressing now. So we'll have some more change orders for sure next month, but nothing that's going to wipe out the contingency.
Right.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have the budget presentation, and this will be Mr. Lego.
Okay, unfortunately, due to some technology issues this evening, I don't have the overhead working. So you did all receive, though, in your packet, a copy of both the presentation and the executive session, or the executive summary for your use. I guess I had a premonition that the technology wouldn't work.
We need to wait after.
You don't have to wait after.
That's the problem.
So, so you can follow along. I'm going to look at the slides on my computer here. First, I want to thank the board for their support over the course of the past year as we prepare for this budget. I think we've been fortunate that we positioned ourselves that even though you may not necessarily, oh, here she comes to the rescue. Yay. Go ahead, can take it right there. Okay. Even though you may not like what you end up hearing tonight, I think we're in a lot better position than a lot of other districts because we've used a lot of foresight over the years to put ourselves in a position where the budget remains at a reasonable level. We don't have any extravagant spending. We've maximized our revenues, and we faced some challenges in terms of what both the state and federal government have done to us in terms of our funding levels. So, again, I thank the board for their support. I thank Dr. Harris and Mr. Inglace for their input and their thoughts and their efforts to keep things in check. My own staff, my assistant, Mrs. Wayner, who did the bulk of the salary work for this, which is over 50% of our budget. Mrs. Smith, who handles the benefit side of it, which is also a very significant part of our budget. Mrs. Massarelli, Mrs. Smolka, and Mrs. Roush in my office, who helped prepare and put together all the documents. So I just want to thank them all for helping me make this a lot easier. Okay, you're getting there. So here we are, May 2nd, 2016, at 2:49 p.m. this afternoon. we had received the latest, greatest spreadsheet from the state on the 2015-16 budget. So here we are presenting 2016-17, and only today did we receive the latest version of the state's attempt to try to get 15-16 settled. So very difficult for us to put together any sort of accurate revenue numbers when we don't know from the state what we're getting for the current year, let alone next year. So what you'll see tonight is a work in progress. Again, we try to get out early, get our job done, unlike the politicians in Harrisburg who never seem to get us a budget on time. Right. Okay, so while we're waiting for Mr. Lace to fire it up. Okay, for the 15-16 school year, our budget expenditures were $51.5 million. For the upcoming 16-17, we're projected to be at $53.8 million, an increase of $2.3 million or 4.5%. Of that $2.3 million, $1.6 million is attributed directly to the increase in the PSERS or the pension cost of the district. Another $800,000 relates to salary increases. So when you look at that $2.3 million increase, the lion's share are for those two items. Throughout the budget, it'll be pretty redundant when I keep saying the increases are due to salaries and benefits, salaries and benefits, salaries and benefits. The only real increases in expenditures outside of that are contractual costs of transportation, some increases in our special education costs, some new equipment throughout the district, but all of those numbers are relatively small in comparison to what those two, the PSERS and the salaries are. Revenues for the current year were $51.6 million. Next year projected to be $53.3 million, an increase of $2 million or 4.03 increase. So we're not quite balanced at this point. We will continue to work over the course of the next month before final passage to bring down our expenditures and to utilize our revenues in such a way that we not only address the operation of the district, but the future of the buildings and the configuration of the district going forward. I know the board is committed to putting together and approving a plan that will shape how the district's going to look over the next 10 or 15 years. Thanks, Scott. Okay, so there's the slide I was just talking about. So in the interest of the Penguin game everyone's going to go see, I'm going to try to move through it quickly. Feel free to stop me and ask any questions, but we can also discuss this further next week and in our first June meeting before final adoption. I mean, this will change before we adopt the budget in June. Okay, what were the big changes? Well, real estate, and to be right up front, part of that is going to be a recommendation initially to increase the rate of our real estate. We just don't have many other options given the lack of increase in basic subsidy. A big part of our increase in revenue is because for 50 cents on the dollar, they reimburse us for the increase on retirement. The expenditures, salaries, and benefits mostly being in the retirement line item. This graph is a little bit deceiving because at this point the state hasn't yet given us our real estate reduction number, so I had to back that out of state revenues, put that into local revenues. It's a net zero change, but it will at this point show local revenue being a little bit higher, 55%, the state being 43%, and the federal government just over 1%. Again, an increase of $2.4 million in local revenue. $1 million of that is the shift from the state property tax reduction number. The rest of that would be an increase in the assessment of real property, an increase in the millage rate, and the growth of our earned income, which continues to still at this point look to be positive. The state number, the biggest increase would be in the retirement line item. We did receive apparently a modest increase in our basic subsidy, but when you take those numbers and back out the $1 million, it's actually right now showing a decrease of $187,000. That'll show a slight increase when the final budget is passed in Harrisburg and we get that number. The federal revenue number down $218,000. That reflects a loss of access funds, which come from the federal government, which will impact not only the fund balance this year because we're not going to receive what we had anticipated, and we need to start phasing that number out because we won't be receiving those funds in the future.
Brett, that access fund, that's directed primarily to our special needs students?
That is directly funding our special needs students. Correct. So services which we could previously bill for and be reimbursed, that's changed and we're no longer able to do that. Okay, again, just very briefly, our local revenues a $2.4 million increase, which is actually about $1 million less than that.
That increase, Brett, though, 630,000 of that would be in the proposed millage increase?
Correct. 600, it proposed, as you said, proposed, not final, proposed. State revenues, again, our basic subsidy increase was about $200,000. The retirement rate would have been about $600,000, but then we're losing $1 million on the property tax, which we expect will come through, but because the state budget form is pre-populated and there's a $0 number in there, I had to take it out and shift it back over to the local. And there we start to see the phase out of the access fund.
Does that also, did you also include a possible loss of $100,000 due to us opting out of the lunch program?
The lunch program is separate from the general fund budget.
That'll be somewhere else in here?
You won't see that in the general fund budget. That's in the food service budget, so we don't reflect that number in the general fund.
All right, so it'll be somewhere else.
Now, at some point, the general fund may have to make that contribution up, but that wouldn't be until next year when we see how the operation is. So that always kind of lags a year behind. So that number you'll probably see in next year's presentation, depending on the results of how it works when we get out of that program. But you're correct that if we, well, when we opt out of the program, we'll lose $100,000 in federal revenue from the food service program, which we will optimistically make up through increased sales and participation. So there's our $2 million or 4% increase. On the expenditure side, you see 60% goes toward instruction. That's a great thing. That's where our money should be going, into the classrooms. 31% for support. That would be items such as your principal's office, your superintendent's office, business office, maintenance, transportation, health services, guidance, library, etc. Non-instruction at 3%, that's our athletics and extracurriculars basically. And the other uses of 5% is our debt service. I can tell you the 5% debt service is an extremely low number, and that's a good thing. You really don't want a big debt number, and ours is one of the best in the state. You can see consistently the percentage increases. Instruction up $1.4 million or 4.6%. Support $790,000 or 4.9%. Non-instruction $78,000 or 4.6%. And debt service, which we have level funded basically, is up 0.5%. That fluctuates up and down every year just a little bit based on the interest of the principal. So our overall expenditures up to $2.3 million or 4.5%. I think the way those percentages have increased at the same rate basically demonstrate how salaries and PESers are driving the numbers. And again, we haven't really added any additional programs, we haven't made any major purchases, and staffing with, there's a couple of additional positions, but not much change there. So regular programs, these are our most of our charges in the classroom, our regular education programs, a $1 million increase or 3.9%. Special education, up $437,000, again, mostly salaries and benefits. There were a couple positions that we didn't have in the budget last year that are included in there that made that skew that number up a little bit. We're still looking to see how that impacts our purchase services, which may go down, so this number may go down in the final budget if we realize that our outside services are not as great. Our vocational technical program, which we will approve their budget next week, really no change in our projected cost. That being mostly a result of us having a few less kids participate based on the whole number of kids in the program. Other instruction is basically our driver's ed program and a few other small little programs, $7,000, so the percentage looks a little bit big, but it's only $8,000 increase. Pupil personnel services, an increase of $146,000 or 13%. Again, I think there's another position that we didn't have in the budget last year that is reflected in here, and that's why that number, $146,000 isn't a great increase, but that makes the percentage increase. Again, and this is some services that we pulled back and may be reflected in our contracted services when the final budget's done. Supplemental instruction, this is library services and a few other things, very small increase. I think we might have eliminated a position there, so we're actually only at $1,500 increase. Administrative services, this is basically the principal's offices and the superintendent's office. 4.1%, there's that common number, $137,000. The only changes are salaries and benefits. Likewise, in health services, salaries and benefits, 4%, $23,000. Business services, $55,000. There is some money in there to replace some computers in the business office. Not a great, huge number, but it skews it because the overall budget isn't that big. Again, one of the few new items we have, but our business office computers are 5 years old and on their last legs, and we don't want to crash and not pay people. Operation of plant and maintenance, this is our maintenance and custodial services, $324,000, 5.7%. We are anticipating a new position at the high school because of all the extra square footage that we have, all the extra glass that we have, so that number is a little bit higher percentage-wise than most other areas. Transportation by contract, $95,000, 3%. Technology, again, the only increases are salaries and benefits, 1.5%. We are using our existing money that we've built into the budget for supplies and leases. We're maximizing those, turning computers over smartly. So we haven't had to, we have increased this budget over the years, but I think we've gotten to a point now where we can pretty much sustain what we want to do throughout the district. We're doing more things based in the cloud, which is saving us some money. So this number we've been able to keep in check. Other services, these are basically some of our cafeteria aids. This is also our IU contribution. No change there, projected to be the same, small dollars. Student activities, $78,000 increase, 5%, again in line, basically nothing new except for salaries and benefits. Community services, these are the monies that we allocate for the libraries, the rec boards, for crossing guards. I know we had a lot of discussion on this issue, and we are getting out of the library and the rec business over the next several years. But for now, we're going to leave that amount where it's at. And if we find that there are other better ways that we can help the community, we will do so. Debt service, again, that we're over the next 15 years, pretty much the same number, so no real increase there. Right now, we're not going to plan on any fund transfers. That may to Mr. Kachassik's question, that's where, if we need to subsidize the food service, that's where you'll see that number. We're not having any reserve other than our fund balance. So again, our increase in expenditures, $2.2 million. I think I have an error in the slides. $2.3 million or 4.5%. Apologize for that. Because I didn't change my 50. The 16-17 number's wrong, right? The 15-16 was last year's preliminary, not final number. I apologize. So at this point, based on the index, we can go 2.4 mils. As you can see, before today's state numbers come out, if we use 2.4 mils, we would need about additional $500,000 of fund balance to have a balanced budget. Now, based on what we saw today, the revenue should be at least $200,000 better, so we'd be closer to using $300,000 of fund balance. But at this preliminary stage, and still having 3 months of data to go through at the end of the year on the expenditure side, we're confident by final passage that we will not need $2.4 million for operations, and then it'll be the board's decision that anything over and above what we need for operations, do they want to dedicate, and are we ready to commit to a plan for how the district's going to be reconfigured over the next 10 to 15 years. I know we've had several discussions concerning consolidation, grade reconfiguration, so on and so forth. If we can get the millage increase down for operation, the decision then to be made is how much of that do you want to start to set aside, put in reserve to build toward your future plan. So again, we can have this discussion, we can discuss this more next week, we can discuss it more next month before final adoption. The administration is committed to really hitting on the expenditures over the next month, seeing where we have realistic cuts we can make. This is very conservative at this point. We know we can make some cuts before final adoption. It's just a matter of how much, where, and what makes the most sense without really impacting our educational programs, because we think that we have a pretty good educational program going, and we really don't want to impact that at the expense of a few dollars. Just again today, I just got the updated Westmoreland County property values, so this number's off a little bit, but at 77.85 is the current millage. The average home would generate a bill of $21.79. Next year, if we go to the maximum, that bill would become $22.46. So the increase to an average homeowner would be $67.19.
Per year, for the year.
Per year. So, you know, nobody, well, I wouldn't say nobody, because we have some people in this room that really don't like to raise taxes, and I'm one of them. I know that number is a lot to a lot of people, and but hopefully, if we have to go that far, our residents and taxpayers will understand that to maintain a quality education that attracts people into our community, we may need to make that adjustment and may need to make that increase. And we're not doing it to be extravagant or have unnecessary expenditures. I think, you know, our staffing, if you look in comparison to other districts, we have the lowest number of teachers for a district our size. Our debt service is lower than most districts of our size. So I don't think by any means, you know, we're at $53 million. You look at Penn Hills, who's has less kids than us, their budget is almost $80 million. So I don't think we're really being too, overspending too much. We hope to end the year with $3.75 million. That is down from last year, and a big reason for that is the loss of access monies. We anticipated being able, that maybe that there was gonna be a change, and I didn't catch the fact that, that number was gonna tank this year, but, so we could see a reduction in our fund balance, $3.7 million. Of that, $2 million will be assigned, and what we've assigned it for is the Peasers increases and/or future renovations and construction. Fortunately, we haven't really dipped into that number yet, and this year is the last year of the Peasers increases being at the rate they are. It was a 20% increase in Peasers this year. So next year, that increase will be much lower. So we've got through this whole spike, you know, fortunately, and the board's done a great job of putting that little bit extra millage aside, and it's putting us in a pretty good place. And that would leave 1.7 million unassigned, which is on the low side, but it's still enough that, you know, right now we're pretty solid, pretty sound. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions, take any comments. And again, just to reassure you that before we pass a final budget, we will be digging into the expenditures, reducing every area we can so that we can pass a responsible budget with an eye on the future and being able to plan for, you know, what the district's going to look like. And I will ask for a vote this evening on a preliminary. Again, preliminary, will not, this is not the final budget. We'll have something different for you next month. So, and again, any questions, anytime, call me, email me, text me, whatever.
The final numbers from the state,
Yes.
because it seems to still be a sort of a moving target. When do you think we'll have one of those?
Well,
You know, this month?
what I saw today was there's not going to be any further adjustments now until June when they do a final reconciliation. What they're reconciling, I don't know, because the formula seems to change daily. The numbers shouldn't change much from what I told you today. Basically, if I read the numbers correctly, there's $200,000 more in state revenue than was reflected on my slide, so that number shouldn't change all that significantly. But I doubt it'll be done by our final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Lego, very,
Welcome.
very thorough. Is there any questions from the fellow board members or the public? Any questions on it? Yeah, that will be an action item when we come to Dr. Harris.
Sure. Only one other thing under information, I tried to put this on there, Penn Trafford Community Ed Foundation, the Battle of the Books is Thursday night at the high school. We're excited, this is the first ever Battle of the Books, and we have about 250 children participating. So it means we have 250 more kids reading about 8 books each, so more books, more knowledge, and it's going to be exciting. So please come out, read the kids on. There's also going to be, is it the Chalking Dad? Is that what his name is called? He's gonna be there as well. The guy, he draws with the chalk and presents pictures.
I don't know.
He's one of the extra speakers or presenters.
There's gonna be a photo booth though.
Photo booth will be present, Chinese auction, different prizes.
Scholastic Book Fair.
The Scholastic Book Fair. The nice lady who made the brochure said even Dr. Harris is going to be there, which I thought was funny. I'm like, oh, okay. And I was reading the flyer. I'm like, oh, that's nice for her. But I thought that was kind of comical. So please come out Thursday night.
Just a comment from, I ran into a grandmother, attended the Sunrise McCullough
Culture Fest.
Fest, loved it. She said it was unbelievable. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful organizational groups there.
We ended up, she was planning, she thought maybe about 250 people would show up, Patty Kearns, and then we estimated people count due to our traffic controllers about 450.
That's great.
Wow.
And there was plenty of food left, so it'll
She
be
said
one.
the best thing was the kids were actually, I guess, serving food and seating people, and she said that was fun to interact with them and watch them try and do the job, so.
It was 21st century learning at its best. The kids were planning the project, thinking about it, creating, and it's applying what they did to real life learning. And you can't ask for that's. They're going to remember that far more than if they just did by doing a worksheet or reading a book or something. That actually the involvement. So that was very proud, and all the groups that came out and all the different cultures that were represented too. I know Georgia took lots of pictures, and I appreciate that, so we'll be looking forward to her paper coming out with the story on that. Recognition of visitors, Mr.
Yeah, no one signed in, and still open. Anybody, any questions? Any residents from the school district? Okay, thank you. Dr. Harris, continue.
Nice. Next week, under athletics and extracurricular, we're going to ask you to accept resignations, employ personnel, and approve volunteer coaches. Under budget and finance, approve the career tech budget for 2016-2017, approve compensation rates for 2016-2017, elected treasurer for 2016-2017, approve expenditures relating to the high school renovation project according to the schedule, and we talked about that earlier. Approve change order requests, as we discussed earlier. And the next one, I just want to talk about this for a brief moment. We're going to ask you to authorize submission of Plan Con Parts A and Plan B to the state. I'll kind of turn that over to Brad.
Yeah, the state, in the last budget approval, set the Plan Con process back in motion. However, there's a limited window for new projects, and that window closes, I believe it's May the 16th. And by submitting plans A and B, which are basic schematic preliminary plans, if you get those approved and if you get them in before the date, then you are eligible for that project to be reimbursed. Once the final plans, which can be, completely different than the preliminary plans, are approved. So it makes sense for a district, if they're planning any projects, and I think during the course of my presentation, I mentioned the fact that the district, the board is planning on coming up with a comprehensive district program, which would include potential construction or renovation. So if we can present some preliminary plans to the state, even though the final plans may look completely different, we'll position ourselves to be eligible for reimbursement. So that's why we'd ask for permission to submit plans A and B, even though it really commits us to nothing, it just sets us in line for reimbursement.
We're probably looking at submitting 4 sets of A and B.
Okay.
A potential middle school project, potential elementary project, actually 2 middle school projects to deal with the 2 middle schools. So we have to do 3 of them, 2 middle schools and 1 elementary. So again, just to get our foot in the door so that we have the potential for getting reimbursement later on down the road. So.
Right.
How long will that be a placeholder?
As far as I know, once they're approved, they're approved. So the placeholder is indefinite.
But it does not commit us to doing anything. It doesn't commit us to adding buildings, eliminating buildings, reconfiguring things. It's just basically to get a spot on the list to make sure we get reimbursed. Right.
And I know George Dunbar has been very active and supportive with all the details and notifying us of different things too as well. So I do appreciate his help. I should ask him the one question of why, this date was so, it seemed like it was kind of rushed with the May 15th date.
Very, very much so.
I mean,
and Hank has been agreeable to get some very general schematic drawings together by the 15th so that we could have them approved. So he's going to have a rough time getting it done, but he said he'll make sure he gets it done for us.
Well, quite honestly, I believe the reasoning behind that short date was because they don't want to commit any more funds than they really have to. So if they shorten the window, then that limits their exposure on the state level in terms of what's potentially reimbursable.
so like I said, this is the time to do it, so we can get it done. All right, then next week, and this is actually for tonight, it's an action item, so I'll refer back.
Just real quick, on Plan Con A and B, I, acting as senior board member, and also was involved in renovations over 20 years ago. I asked Dr. Harris just there briefly here now to, what he put in the prospectus last month was very informational for the public to read, and I asked him to present to the board by June 2 suggestions, minimum of 2, no more than 3, that the board can discuss, and then we can also present it to the public, and also a cost figure with it. because right now we have 9 board members who have a big interest and realize it should be done, but we have to start narrowing our vision now to put down to one big scope. And while we are all here together, and because if you wait a few more years, the board changes and you have different board members don't like this or do want to add to this, and it can become helter-skelter. So I did ask him that, and so if anybody had any questions after he presents this to us, he did not do this on his own. I requested him to do that. Okay, Dr. Harris, continue.
All right. Actually, I'm going to turn over to you for budget and finance.
Okay, we have an action item from Mr. Chessie.
Thank you, Mr. President. To move to tentatively adopt the preliminary budget for the Penn Trafford School District for the 2016-17 school year in the amount of $53,857,497 for advertisement and publication in accordance with district policy and school laws of Pennsylvania. Preliminary budget calls for a 2.4 mil increase in real estate taxes for a total of 80.25 mils. Rate for Allegheny County would be 16.92.
Our motion by Mr. Chastity, a second on the motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dr. Trey. Any question on motion?
Question.
Pull the board.
You did catch me off guard. Caught me off guard there, Mr. President. Okay, Mrs. Issing.
Oh, I knew I'd be first. Well, I'll just add some commentary. Maybe you don't want commentary.
It's just preliminary.
Okay,
It's not
Yeah.
final.
right, I understand that. I'll say yes, but when it comes to final, unless some of that's going to the capital budget, capital fund, I won't vote on the final budget without that happening. If that made any sense.
Yep. Any other comments?
No, that's it.
Okay. Mr. Kachasik?
Yes.
Dr. Koshko?
Yes, knowing that this is a preliminary final, I would expect some more detail on how.
We will do that. Mr. Leonard?
No.
Mr. Matarazzo is absent. Mr. Nemec?
Yes.
Mr. Petrucci?
Yes.
Mr. Stovar?
Yes.
Dr. Trey?
Yes.
Okay, you have 7 affirmative, 1 no, and 1 absent. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Next week, we won't have anything under buildings and ground safety, employee relations, negotiations, transportation, or food service. Under personnel and curriculum, we're going to ask you to approve substitute teachers and support personnel, authorization to issue reasonable insurance of employment notices, employee summer help, approve leave requests, accept settlement agreement, approve intern assignment, accept resignation, approve an expulsion, employee personnel. Under Policy Public Relations, Legislative Title II, accept and file Information Committee meeting minutes on April 4th, 2016, approve graduation list for the class of 2016, final approval of Board Policy 123.4, dialogues and administration, tentative approval of local board procedures number 004 membership and number 11 principles of governance and leadership. We don't have anything for taxes, insurance, and census.
Are there any questions from any fellow board members? Anything for discussion? Okay, happy Mother's Day to all you fine young ladies out there, and motion for adjournment?
Motion.
Mr. Chassie, second? Second. Second one, Mr. Leonard, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion adjourned, nice meeting. Thank you.